We're here today at the Balmoral Show. There's huge crowds, one of the biggest agri shows in the north, and it's so good to see everybody here. Look, we have a Sinn Féin stand and we really want to engage with everybody and for you to come over. But more importantly today, there's an event taking place, a UI event, to have the discussion on a united Ireland with rural communities and people from the agri sector. And it's so important to get these conversations going. What possibilities and what would you like to see in a united Ireland?
I'm Dr. McAleer, the Sinn Féin spokesperson in agriculture in the north, and I'm delighted to welcome you here today to this discussion, Rural Communities in a New Ireland, which is being hosted by the Sinn Féin Commission on the Future of Ireland. And I want to thank in particular Grace for taking the time to do all the hard work behind the scenes to organise this. This is an event, an opportunity to explore the opportunities for rural and farming communities in a New Ireland. I want to commend this positive engagement by the Commission with community groups, women's and youth organisations, rural Ireland, the business sector, the Irish language community, economists, academics, the wider public, and that includes Northern Protestant opinion. This work has been very helpful in encouraging an optimistic discussion around the benefits of Irish unity. The Commission's next event will take place on Friday 6th of June at 1 p.m. in St Congles in Belfast. And will be themed Health and Care in a New Ireland, and you're all very welcome to attend. Your presence today demonstrates the momentum in the conversation about the future of Ireland, and certainly we in Sinn Féin believe that's the best option for rural communities. People living in rural areas, particularly along the border, operate on an all-island basis, and as much as possible already. And this can be seen particularly in the agri-food sector, in tourism and commerce. A united Ireland will unlock the full economic potential and protect and promote our established international reputation as a world leader in agri-food production. The agri sector is not served by uncertainty regarding farm funding in the north. Two back-to-back systems with different regulatory and financial frameworks. It is unfair that people in the border corridor must navigate both systems. Challenges such as succession, family farming, mental health issues, climate change and the crisis in biodiversity confront the agri-food industry and rural communities right across our island. These challenges can best be met with an all-island approach and structures, and with decisions being made by locally by elected representatives and accountable politicians working in tandem with rural citizens. This makes sense. A new United Ireland with appropriate government structures will benefit the people of this island, including rural dwellers and farm families. Decisions which affect our agri-industry should be made here in Ireland and not by governments in Westminster and other places. The family farms are the backbone of our agriculture sector and rural economies in the north. Recent decisions by the Westminster government have rightly caused concerns for farmers here in the north. Changes to inheritance tax threshold has caused significant concern and could make it more difficult to sustain family farms into the next generation, which are vital to the future of our agri-food sector and many local rural communities. The British government has also announced that there will no longer be a ring-fenced budget for agriculture in the north, which is causing uncertainty with regards to the future of funding. This is in stark contrast with the situation of farmers in the rest of the EU, the rest of Ireland, who continue to receive EU funding. The European Council has stated that in the event of Irish unity, the entire island would re-enter the EU. A single island approach to development of our agri-food sector within the EU is our best way forward. Many, including Sinn Féin, urge the Irish government to begin planning and preparing for constitutional change, and there is now an urgent imperative for the government to establish a citizens' assembly to prepare the groundwork in advance of a unity referendum. Conversations are already happening across the country on farms, at the mart, at our GA clubs, sporting organisations, and indeed in our kitchens and at the school gates. And this is an exciting time for us filled with opportunity. So it's important now for farm families and rural communities to engage in the conversation around the benefits of unity, to ensure that they maximise the benefits that reunification could have for our communities. I want to thank you for attending today, and we encourage you to participate throughout the proceedings and ask you all to have your say and involve yourself in the conversation. and I hope you enjoy the event. I'm certainly looking forward to it. So I'd now like to hand you over to start the main discussion. I'll hand you over to the chairperson, our newest Sinn Féin MLA for Newry and Armagh, and the member of the Éire County with myself and Anya, Aoife Finnegan. Thank you. Grandma August.
Declan, so a card to Falter of Blair. As Declan said, I am Aoife Finnegan MLA for Newry and Armagh, and I'm on the Éire committee, and I am from a rural border area, very proud South Armagh woman. So I know firsthand how important it is to protect farmers and their livelihoods, while empowering them to do so into the future as custodians of the land. You're all very welcome to this public meeting today on the Commission on the Future of Ireland, and I want to thank you all for joining us here in the event space in Balmoral. So today's conversation is a really important one. The theme is rural communities in a new Ireland, and we're here to imagine what the future could and should look like for rural areas, farming families and rural businesses, and crucially how you see your place in that future. This is very much an active meeting. It's not just a Q&A session. We want to hear your observations, thoughts and comments throughout. So I'm delighted to be joined here by a brilliant panel. We have Ian Marshall, Head of Business Development and Policy at Queen's University Centre for Advanced Sustainable Energy. Ian brings over 35 years of experience in the over 35 years of experience in the agri-food and rural business sector. He's also former president of the UFU and has served as a senator. We were supposed to have Keelan Riley today, a Director of Operations at Rural Support. Unfortunately, Keelan couldn't make today, so we're very lucky that Michelle Gildernew, former Agri-Minister, was available today and is going to fill the spot, so we're delighted to have her here today. And last but certainly not least, we have James Lowe, Chairperson of NIAPA and a beef and dairy farmer who understands firsthand the challenges and opportunities facing farming families today. So, without further ado, we are going to begin some questions to the panel, and we'll open it up for comments throughout, but please do feel free to raise your hand at any stage, and if something resonates with you, or if you'd like to add your voice to the discussion. I will keep an eye out for you. I was going to have to put my glasses on because keep an eye on you. But don't be afraid to put your hand up. It's always hard to be the first person. So anyway, I'm going to put the question to the panel. So firstly, how could Irish unity benefit rural communities and farming families? Ian, we put it to you first.
Thanks, Aoife, and thanks for the chance to come and join this discussion. I suppose when you look at this question wouldn't be or shouldn't be any shock to the agricultural industry or the agri-food sector, because in reality we've operated in all Ireland agri-food industry for the last goodness knows how many years. It's always been about companies that have operated in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, companies that work between the two islands and across the two islands, and there never has been any issue. The issues and the barriers to them working together were always coming from policy or legislation that made it more difficult to trade. And I suppose, to be honest, Brexit brought with it an element of that made it more complex. So the notion, the thing that drives, and the interesting thing about when we look at the Irish unity question and the food industry, to be honest, the thing that drives most family farms and businesses is the bottom line. Where will it be better off? Where is there more opportunity for them? Or where the markets? What we have to consider is that as we sit in Northern Ireland, we have access at the moment to a huge GB UK market. It's one of the wealthiest, most lucrative markets in the world for food. But that being said, we've also got access to Europe. 550 million people who need food. What I think we need to do is work out how we can work better across the island to build those relationships that many of them, as I say, are already in place, but work to drive wealth and profit, and I mean for everybody, not for just the farmers and food producers, but for businesses and communities, because what we have to realise is in Ireland, north or south, it's rural communities, it's a rural economy, most people, when you talk to them, are connected to food or farming. I was asked to speak when I was president of the Farmers Union to a school in East Belfast, and I went into a housing estate, and the farther I got, the bigger the flags got, the more the flagstones were painted, and the bigger the bonfires got. And I thought, what in the name of fortune am I doing here to talk about farming? But when I went into that school, the kids in the school started to ask me questions, and their hands went up, and Mr. my uncle's a farmer, Mr. my granda was a farmer, Mr. my cousin's a farmer. And all of a sudden we realised there was a connection there. So everybody in the island has a connection to food and farming. We all consume food every day. So what I think you need to do as regards the unity question is create a conversation where people can see the benefits and the opportunities. You make it inclusive and not contentious. And look, we have a framework to decide about unity through the Good Friday Agreement. I think if you create the space where people can openly work to improve in business and economics, and it's interesting, Aoife said, she's from South Armagh. When I went to the Shannon, one TD said to me, he said, you couldn't be from South Armagh, because I didn't think there was any unionists in South Armagh. But there is, so we're neighbours. But I think what you do is, and it's interesting because sometimes when the question is framed like this, 50% of the people here won't engage in the conversation. But if you frame the question to say, how can we make rural communities wealthier, healthier and better off, then people will engage, and that's when you present the arguments.
Yeah, very well good. Ian, Michelle, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, Aoife, and apologies for Keelan, who wasn't able to make it. I'm delighted that I was able to step in at short notice. But I also want to thank Grace and everybody involved in the organisation of this meeting here today. I think it's hugely important in the biggest set-piece event for the agri-food sector in the north of Ireland that we're having a respectful conversation here at the Balmoral Show about the future of the island of Ireland. And I'm absolutely delighted that Ian Marshall and James Lowe are here with us today as well. I think it's critically important. As an agriculture minister back almost 20 years ago, my term was 2007 to 11. So we were then struggling with both the 6 counties and the 26 counties being part of the European Union, but the border and the difficulties that entailed, especially in that border corridor for farmers. So your raw material could be coming from one side of the border, your markets could be on the other. Farmers in the north were excluded from some of the board-based schemes, for example. And while Ian's right, the agri-food sector is fully integrated on the island of Ireland, and the border has been nothing but a pain in the ass. It was bad back then, it's worse now in terms of Brexit and some of the food products. And we are lucky, and it's no small feat due to Martina Anderson, who was an absolute Trojan in Europe, making sure that every MEP understood what Brexit would mean on the island of Ireland. And I think we have a lot to be thankful for, because we have access to those markets in Britain and access to markets in the EU as well. But we also have to be mindful, we've been into decades of a cheap food policy in Britain that the Tory party particularly were behind, and companies like Tesco would have pushed very hard. And sometimes the return for a high quality product isn't there. The markets in Britain especially want food cheap, and we know that on the island of Ireland it can't be produced well and cheaply. And I think that we need to be looking outside of the markets that we currently have as well, to make sure that third countries and other countries that maybe would appreciate the benefit of grass-reared beef. Our milk goes right around the world, and it's a very high quality product. Look at Irish butter and the reputation it has around the world. So I think we need to do better on the island of Ireland to make sure that our farmers are adequately and properly resourced for the work that they do. And I think sometimes that's forgotten about. Farming is a career. Every business is involved in business to make money, and many times over the year, farmers are not able to make money and to be sustainable. And we have to ensure, and while there's been lots of great work going on around bringing other streams of income into the farm, we have to recognise that it could be so much more profitable and needs to be. So we recognise the importance of farmers, and I'm delighted to hear that story that Ian told in East Belfast, because many years ago the then President of Ireland Mary McAleese brought both the Ulster Farmers Union, NIAPA, and many of the stakeholders in the north down to Aris and Uachtaráin and talked about the importance of farming and how we're only a generation or two away from the land. And that was certainly, Ian saw that in East Belfast. We need people to recognise the sterling work that our farmers do, the long hours that they work, and how difficult it is to continue to produce food. Everybody in this world needs to eat, and we need to ensure that that farming is, we want the next generation to want to go into it. We have to ensure that succession opportunities are there. But by and large, the border has really made farming difficult on the island of Ireland pre-Brexit. It's worse since Brexit. And if we are back into, as has been suggested, if in the post-unity, every farmer is back in the European Union, I think that's vitally important. And farmers from whatever side of the constitutional argument are, recognise how important it would be to have the entire island of Ireland working together to better promote farming, promote our produce, and promote Irish food around the world as being of the quality that it is. So I think the unity question is more important to farmers probably than it is to any other sector on the island of Ireland, and I'm delighted that so many people are here today. So thank you.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, go ahead.
Hi Aoife, thank you, thanks for the invitation. For those who don't know me, I'm James Lowe, chairperson of NIAPA. So the very origin of NIAPA was set up in the mid-70s, early to mid-70s, for a voice for the small rural farmer, who very much were in the doldrums back then in terms of a voice, and they have, they're still proceeding to carry that message to today. I suppose my peers, they have, I'm only echoing what they've said. We sort of represent farmers here, about 3,000 members. I suppose the first thing Ian and Michelle both mentioned is money. The farmers have to get a living. And in the current climate, of white people, sorry, thanks Grace. Apologies for the noise, it sounds like a bit like a cattle market, excuse the pun. No, as I said, there were 3,000 members, they have to get a living, and I suppose the key priorities that we'd have, is regarding the All-Ireland status is having a free and a frictionless trade across the island of Ireland, and also with our nearest neighbours, England. Obviously that comes with caveats as well. You have SPS checks, which is going to be crucial on that in terms of having frictionless trade, both with medicine products and getting across and getting stuff exported. Obviously the big buzzword there was a number of buzzwords that meant, but obviously the agricultural produce relief, property relief tax is huge amongst our members there at the moment. It's causing a lot of anxiety. A lot of guys are looking, well, they're saying, well, like, ask the question, if it was, if it was no border, if it was a united Ireland, would this, manifest into this scenario? So that's the kind of questions that we're hearing been asked. Our membership is very much from both sides of the community. Like we're guys from like 5 cows to 1,005 cows, and while they say the unionist community, they're very, they're good at their job, and again, it's about money. As long as they're getting a living, a decent living, they'd be prepared to have the chat about then a sort of an All-Ireland economy, because they already know, as Ian pointed out, that our produce, like 17 counties, our milk goes, Lakeland and different, is only using that as an example, take milk from all 6 counties, along with another 11 down south. So it's all a mixed origin product. So it's basically, and for our youth, it's vital that our youth, sort of see this message coming through that there is the push for United Ireland, that there is a better way out there. We have to respect everybody's opinion, but just to reinforce, our nearest neighbours are crucial for trade off the island. I don't know if there's anything else that, you sort of only echoing what you have said there, so happy to take questions.
Thanks, James. I just going to, after all that, I'm going to see if any questions or any comments want to be made. Just raise your hand. Oh, and I thought you were going to be the first person. Malaysia, go ahead. And just shout because it's very loud here.
Is it not the case that for farmers in the north of Ireland in particular, that they should be really considering which state is more likely to take on board their considerations and fears and anxieties? Is it more likely to happen here, we'll say, in an all-Ireland state, or we'll say in a state that doesn't depend on agriculture for its very existence? In fact, if anything, agriculture will always be, as they would say in agriculture, sucking the hiding tit whenever it comes to, we'll say, legislation within a British Parliament, that where it's not a priority.
And you're completely correct in what you say. And I remember doing meetings quite a number of years ago, and the reality was in London on Cabinet there wasn't a single farmer, landowner voice represented. Now, I was 3 years down in the Dáil, or down in Shannon, sorry. And to be honest, there's a greater interest in food and farming and land and food production there. But that's just the nature of the makeup of government, of cabinet, and of the people in politics. What's interesting for me is I don't think it's one or the other, and I've always made this point that both are equally as important. The UK market, Northern Ireland currently feeds about 10 million people annually in the UK market, but Europe opens up a massive market. We bring 24% of the food into the UK from Europe, and we export from Northern Ireland about 85% of all the food we produce. So I think agriculture's position has changed. It has been eroded. It hasn't as strong a voice as it used to. But there's an interesting dynamic happening at the moment, because we've gone through an era of cheap food, and nobody really gave a damn about food and farming, because you went into the supermarkets, there's plenty of it there, and it was really cheap. All of a sudden, climate change, global warming, geopolitics, energy insecurity has changed that dynamic, and all of a sudden people are starting to recognise that food is much more important than we've thought previously. I did a meeting this morning, one of the breakfast meetings, with a chief executive who's selling a commodity into Irish and British markets. He said he was fighting and struggling 3 years ago to get them to give him the minimal price that they could get away with. He says they have moved 35-40% on the price, and there's nobody even asking a question about price. The question one of the big supermarkets asked at the breakfast table, because it was noted in a supermarket in Northern Ireland there's a scarcity of food. I'm not going to name the supermarket, but it's a Belfast supermarket, and if you go in on certain days, the shelves are not full. And the reason for that is that food is now getting in shorter supply, and those that will pay the most for it can get it. So food is changing, farming is changing. The only industry that can deliver on climate change is agriculture. We're the only industry that can sequester carbon. We're the industry that can provide energy security. We're working on a project at the minute to take all the agricultural slurries and the waste, and when you're all driving down to Balmoral and you see the tractors and the tankers and you think, oh my God, bloody farmers, they're at it again spreading slurry. All of a sudden that nutrient resource has a huge value, because what we've demonstrated is if we take the slurry and process it, we can produce 82% of the gas Northern Ireland needs. And what that means is that the £5 billion we spend every year to give money to other parts of the world for oil and gas and coal, we can actually generate a lot of that at home, so we can have that wealth at home. So in answer to your question, I think it's important that we always pitch it for food and farming to make sure that we maximise, back to the point about revenue, what's best for Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland and the island of Ireland. We're brilliant at producing food, and I think we need to put pressure on the politicians. I'm a farmer one, there's a farmer one here, and it's interesting because I worked with Michelle, and she's the only on a light-hearted note, I went to a meeting with her one day, and they were trying to get the Agriculture Minister there at high speed, and she arrived at the meeting with a police escort, lights and sirens going to get her there, and she came rushing in, and unflustered, she turned around and she said, "You know, Ian, that's a bit unique because I'm used to them coming behind me, not going in front of me." But the important thing, to answer your question, is London don't really value it. Dublin, I think, value it more. But be under no illusion, there's a very strong element of green environmental lobby groups that are opposed to farming. They want to see less farmers, they want to see less cattle. And what we need to do is make sure that we let them know that we live in the second best grass growing region in the world. We're phenomenally good at producing food. And what's more, if they cut back the farming industry on this island and have 20% less dairy cows, for example, the people in London will not consume less milk or eat less meat. They'll get it from somewhere else in the world. So we need to fight hard with Dublin, with Leinster House, with Westminster to make sure we protect agriculture. And again, we have a mechanism to decide the constitutional future. And the people will judge this not based on flags or emblems or ideology. They'll base it on the money in their pocket, and where I'll make a call, as everybody will here, based on, will my children be wealthier, healthier and better off? And that's our responsibility to make the case to say, this is where you'll be better off, and people decide.
Thank you, Ian. We're going to go to Michelle next, you've indicated.
Thanks, and thanks, Melissa, for your question. And if I can just give the gist of it, you were asking, would we be better off in the future under an all-Ireland government here on the island of Ireland, or under the current status quo, which is under the British government, and what the difference is? That sort of roughly your question? Right, so I suppose on that, because post-unity, we're not just back into the EU, we have an all-island agriculture minister. We have somebody who's looking at agriculture across the 32 counties. And Ireland is a food producing nation. Britain has had a very different relationship with its farmers. And I know because we would have worked with the farmers' unions in England, Scotland, Wales, I know that there was a wee bit of envy in England around the fact that England, Scotland, Wales and the north of Ireland had devolved regions and devolved ministers and somebody fighting their corner. And I've been in meetings where I could have written the script for the 26 county agriculture minister. He was on the exact same page as everything I wanted to say, but the DEFRA minister was on his speech wasn't written by DEFRA, it was written by the Treasury. And that's the kind of difference that we have. A lot of the agriculture policy in Britain is guided by the Treasury and about what they need, not what farmers need. And certainly I think that's flipped in Ireland, and we are very conscious here in Ireland of the needs of farmers and farm families. So that's another advantage to that. But at a previous commission event, we had a farmer speaking at it, and he said, and I'm going to quote him, and this might just completely answer your question, Melissa. The North is very far down a British politician's list, and farming is very far down their list. So when you're a farmer from the North, you're maybe not even on the list, and we feel helpless. And that's the reality and that's the view, right, like I say, across the constitutional framework. So, we recognise that Britain will never get farmers the way politicians in Ireland do. There's not the same relationship or the same dynamic. And that's why this Labour government and bringing in the inheritance tax, they're so far out from the needs and the requirements and the reality of farmers. And these are the kind of things that will never be dealt with while this part of Ireland is under an administration in Britain.
Thanks, Michelle. And James, I'll let you come in on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, folks, I can endorse what Michelle has said there. I suppose in my term I've met numerous English politicians from prime ministers down, and we are very far down their priority list in terms of policy here. In fact, just go back a short distance back at COVID time, farmers were key in keeping the place, producing food, keeping the place going, and were well recognised for that. And that literally lasted about a week, maybe 2 weeks, hit the headlines, and then they're fit to get produce in here and there, but there's no surplus of food, as Ian rightly pointed out. So just we're very far down the priority list. I've seen that, and just endorse what you've said there.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question then, and the last question. So just to the panel, how do you visualise the future? So Michelle, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Aoife. I was going to use that time to have a wee think about it. But I certainly feel that agriculture in Ireland is a key area of work. It is a very important part of the gross domestic product of the island of Ireland. I'm not able to pull the figures, I don't have the figures on the tip of my tongue, but in terms of, I think there is a bright future for farming on the island of Ireland, but I think that future is much brighter in a 32 county context. And I think if we didn't have to deal with all of the hoops that we have to go through in terms of the being in a part of the administration under DEFRA, along with our regional ministers, I think we need to see unity is going to be the game changer. It's going to be transformative for the future of the family farm. And I think we do need to recognise, and I know I would have come up many a time, the Farmers Union, I think, felt at times that I was maybe more sympathetic to small farmers than to big farmers. But at the end of the day, we need you all. Farming is the backbone of the Irish rural communities. And whether you have 1,000 cattle or 40, you are still an integral and really important part of the gross domestic product on the island of Ireland, and the way in which we operate. I know my father is retired now, but when he was farming, he could have went to Kerry, Tillamart, or farmers from Mayo would come across to Granville Mart. The whole island is very integrated in terms of its farming. The future is bright, but under this current regime, I think our farmers are going to struggle, and we need to transform that on behalf of everybody. We're back in a United Ireland situation. We're back in the European Union. We've got an Irish minister who's speaking for us at those European and global events. And that in itself is going to make a big difference. I'm also very aware today that one of the things we do have climate change to worry about. I have a friend at the minute who's in Spain, and it's bucketing every day and overcast. He's got our weather there, we've got his here. And as a result, nobody at the Balmoral Show wants to be inside. So I want to thank everybody who's come along today and given up an hour of their time to come to this discussion. But I think we do have great talent on this island. We have people who are absolutely committed to the future of Irish family farms. And as long as we can maintain that, work towards unification, work towards a better future for all farmers on the island of Ireland, and ensure that we have the sustainability, the new farmers, the new entrants into the farming sector. And as Ian has said, bring about changes to climate control, introduce climate change responsible measures that ensure that our farmers have a future, and that we are not having to get rid of some of our national herd, that we're not having to reduce the scope. I also want to say to the young people here today, and I know you're a wee bit shy down at the back, but I think young farmers are the future. Without yous, we won't have one. So I also want to thank the participation of the young farmers clubs here today. And if you would, I know you were scared by Aoife mentioning the podium, but we'd love to hear from you, love to hear your thoughts at this very historic event. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And just before we move on, I was actually going to say just that I do see us at the back, members of the YFCU, and certainly we got a brief from them at the committee earlier, and it was very insightful to see. And on that panel there was 2 women, which I think is so important, to recognise women in the agri sector, and it is becoming more prevalent. And I think your percentages of your membership was almost 50-50, which is so good to see. And yes, you are the voice of the future, so I would be really interested if you did at any stage want to come up before it finishes today, just I suppose to give your vision of what you would like to see on the island of Ireland for in a united Ireland, and how that, I suppose, the opportunities that would pose for you. So while you think about that, if you want to, I'm going to give it over to James.
Thanks again, Aoife. Yeah, well, again, suppose how do I see the future? The future, again, our youth is a vital cog for the future in agriculture. Currently, at the minute, the present regime, they've been suffocated at the moment with the farm nutrient management scheme is the latest one. As I mentioned earlier, the APR, inheritance tax, the list goes on. It's very difficult to sit down with a young person and and sort of plot out a path around those things at the moment. They're huge hurdles, huge, and there doesn't seem to be, the farmers, they're on the ground. They don't. They feel isolated at the moment. They're okay. There's lobby groups. The UFU do a good job. Ourselves to a lesser extent, but within a day we're toothless. There doesn't seem to be a lot of funding, coming from these organisations and help to, put a structure in place either. The farmers have to be paid for the produce, and currently only on-farm produce at the moment is a good price at the moment, but they also incur heavy production costs as well. It is a worry going forward. Those pitfalls are, they have to be sorted, and our current minister, not to be name checking him at the moment, I don't know who's advising him, but he's getting a lot of support obviously from the environmental. The farming organisations can't underestimate the hold that the environmentalists are holding on over our minister on these policy decision-making rules. Loch Ness, obviously for our youth and motorsports and whatnot, and people living in that catchment area, has been hitting the headlines. But again, I'd say for all the wrong reasons. I mean, farmers again have been harshly targeted over that. I mean, when it's clear that NI water, it's well documented. You don't need me repeating that, but I mean, it should be repeated. It's not all farmers' fault, and we're part of the solution, and we're here to, as Ian said, we have, we're capturing carbon, and we're been made jump through hoops and been, been penalised, and the latest proposals now is for on-farm penalisations brought by our minister. It just beggars belief, some of the stuff that's coming down the line. But other than that, I see a future in farming. It's a great occupation. I would say it's more a vocation than actually going down to for a way of life. But yeah, that's the way I see it. A lot of room for improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And I do agree. We do hear more and more about farmers' frustrations and feeling very squeezed, because at the end of the day, their livelihood is at stake here, particularly with the feedback we're getting with the Nutrient Action Plan. And although it's still open for consultation, the proposals in it, the Minister does talk about a just transition, but the proposals that are in it are very much looking like, it is going to be targeted at the farmers. It may be targeted at the farmers, and they're very worried about that. And I suppose in the context, I'm just interested in your take on it in the terms of a United Ireland. How would that change that we would have that cross-border? Because a lot of them border communities are affected as well. So what's your feedback on that in the instance of a United Ireland?
Well, simply just to reiterate, Aoife, our current regime up here don't have the farmers' best interests at heart. It's well documented over my farming career that southern farms are, the economy is based, both here and southern Ireland. The economy is based in both, and rely very heavily on agriculture. So yes, it is better in I can't speak for every member, but certainly we'll be advocating it would be better in a United Ireland situation, 32 county. I mean, we are, sort of interlinked everywhere. And around the border areas, it's 310 mile of a border. And I mean, we have members farming on both sides of the border, and they're been better looked after across the border. And milk price, meat price, everything. So, yeah, I mean, the skies, as I say, but then we do have members, and it's important we be respectful of all members. We have members that don't want basically anything to do with the South. So, like, that's the scenario, and it's not going to be a quick fix.
Yeah, and it takes, I suppose, events like this here to have those discussions and to see, where the barriers are, and to have those discussions in spaces like this. So we're very blessed. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Aoife. I suppose, how do you visualise the future? The one thing I know, and we all know, we will not recognise the future. Change is happening so fast. Everybody in this room today, I guarantee, sitting with a phone in front of them that's probably worth 600 to 1,000 quid. 10 years ago, you'd have been laughed out of the building if you'd told us that. But that's how fast things are moving. Digitalisation is changing agriculture. Technology is changing agriculture. Robotics is changing agriculture. And for the first time in a long time, as James referenced, we see young people who want to come back into the industry and want to make a future in the industry. I read a book last summer, and it's by a historian, which immediately sounds boring as can be, but it's called Land is All That Matters, by an Irish historian called Miles Duggan. And Miles Duggan writes in that book, the connection to this is, I farm in Armagh. And Armagh has a history of having small family farms. It's the 27th smallest county on the island, but in the late 1700s, it was the second wealthiest county in the island, second only to Dublin. So what was happening? The reason Armagh was successful and was very profitable, and you could live on a small family farm, because we had the flax industry, we had the linen industry centred in Armagh. It meant that a farmer could keep his family on a small parcel of land, where in other counties you needed much more land to grind out a living. That's really important, because where are we now with our flax industry? It's gone, it disappeared. Oil, synthetics and all killed off that industry, and it became no more. So what it demonstrates to me, that farming has always changed. Farmers are good at changing, and they will continue to change. So whatever's asked of them, as long as government write the good policy, agriculture will adapt. As we sit here today, we've 8.25 billion people on this planet. If we go back 50 years, which isn't long ago, there were 4 billion. If we go back 100 years to when the island was partitioned, there were 2 billion people on the planet. So we've got to recognise that as much as farming has improved with efficiencies and economies of scale, and it's interesting because I always get asked the question about, is it better to have a big farm or a small farm? The very simple way you can look at this, big farm, big debt, small farm, small debt, you make the decision. It's one way of looking at it. So I think the future of food is really positive. We've got a massive opportunity here, and I think that we have got the right people, we have got land, we have got a temperate climate, we've got access to water, and we can do a really good job. And James made a reference to Lough Neagh, and there's a thing I see happening now with farming communities, which is climate anxiety. Because every time a farmer turns on his phone or opens a newspaper, the planet's warming, climate change is affecting us all, farmers are bad because they produce methane, they produce emissions, they produce slurries, and there's a thing happening out there which is climate anxiety. So we need to say, okay, if we're good at producing food and we can do it well, let's focus on the good side. Let's deliver on what people want, which is sustainable food. We can do it really well, and let's support the industry. And it's really important, because sometimes I think what's missed, that sometimes farmers are blamed for making bad decisions, or wanting to have bigger farms, or wanting to grow or expand, and they're castigated as being greedy. When I came home to a small family farm in Armagh, there was 40 dairy cows. 10 years ago, we had 5 times that, because we had to have 5 times that to keep the same level of income coming into the business, to keep our family on the farm. So I think we'll not recognise the future. I think we're going to be a massive amount of change. But you know what? This is one industry that can change and can do a really good job. So I'd be positive. I think we can deliver on the food, and we can position ourselves as global leaders in food production.
Well, that's Ian, very good. Does anybody want to ask any questions? Don't be shy. Yeah, brilliant. Good. Come on up to the podium, because we'll not hear you otherwise. Fair play to you. Just even a brief introduction of who you are, yeah.
So I'm Joyce Allen, Vice President of the Young Farmers Clubs of Ulster, but I am an agricultural technology graduate and I'm from Cookstown. I farm part-time as well. But just, we've chatted and changed and things like that there. I do believe as a young person within the industry and representing young farmers, there is an appetite. I mentioned earlier at the ERA meeting, you're seeing more women in agriculture coming through. I was a class of 47. 30 or 32 of us was girls, so we don't have that, we're overcoming that sort of issue. But as a young person, so taking on like the family farm, there's different boundaries in place. Firstly, there's the likes of gaining capital, but secondly, we're living in a real conacre across the water. We've got tenants farming different systems, but we're very fixed on our conacre and our winter grazing. We're nearly seen, the landowners are seen as greedy here in the north. Going forward to get into the industry as a young person, I was wondering just what opportunities do you see for a young person like that to overcome those barriers? There's a wee bit of frustration between gaining the capital and then other things like the likes of the NAP consultation out at the minute. It nearly feels like a young person, we're not part of these arrangements, but we're going to be paying the price because this is our future. So I was just wondering what opportunities do you see for a young person?
Opportunities are massive, they're huge, and I'll tell you why. For years, this industry talked itself down, and I remember being taken to my first Ulster Farmers Union meeting as an 18-year-old boy, I was a boy, and I came out of it, and the old man that took me said, well, what do you think of that? And I says, oh my God, that was horrendous. 2 hours of farmers whinging about the weather and prices. I says, I'll never be back. Oh, he says, you will, and he did. He took me back until I got an addiction to it. But if you keep talking an industry down, why would you expect young people to go into it? We're in a position now where this is a good industry, where everybody needs food. Never before have people been aware or so aware of the value of food and what they put into their bodies, and people want good food that they can trace. If we go back a number of generations, if you're a farmer and you produce food, you are well respected in the community, and we lost that kudos, but it's coming back. If we can build a model where a young person can say, you know what, I can make a career of this, I can derive a good living from this, I can bring up my family in this environment, they will come rushing back. And it's interesting because sometimes and I was guilty of this, we said, oh, well, there's less full-time farmers, there's more part-time farmers. But that's actually a consequence of farming all around the world. That's just how it's happening. And part-time farmers now, where there's off-farm income that had to subsidise a farm business, is becoming more the norm. And I see it, and I see it in my own situation, where my son, who went off 9 years ago to start a career in agricultural engineering, has come back as lately as the last 6 months, and he's going to come back home and start up again full-time farming. And the reason he's doing that is because we sat down and we did a business plan, and we costed it. And instead of the old model of you just kind of, if you're the one at school that you weren't really that intelligent and you maybe weren't going to be the doctor or the banker or the lawyer, well, sure, there's always the family farm. That day is gone. It's professional now. You have to know your numbers. You have to be efficient. You have to be good at your job. You have to manage a business. So there's a kudos coming back into it. And when those young people sit down and they do the numbers, and they get the support from their banks, and they get the support through the colleges, and the industry support, and the politics, there's a bright future in this country for young people to be in agriculture. It's a really good life. And I'll just close on this point. Professor Sharon Hughes heads up the Institute of Global Food Security in Queen's. Sharon's here this morning because I was talking to her. She's a Welsh lady. I met her in Queen's last Monday, and she'd been back home for 4 days to the farm in Wales. And she came over to me and she says, oh my God, Ian, I was at home for 4 days. And I said, so what, Sharon? She says, I live in cities all my life. I'm an academic. I work in universities. I went home and I put up fences for 4 days with my brother. I'd forgotten how fantastic it is to be in the country, to live in the country, and to work in the country. It's so tangible. It's such a good way of life. I now understand why farmers want to farm. There's plenty of young people now starting to realise that, and they will come back, but we'll have to talk the industry up. We can't always be owl whinging farmers.
Thank you, Ian. James, I'm going to take you next, and maybe just if we could have a discussion around as well, obviously what Joyce has mentioned, but in terms of if we go back into the EU and the single farm payment and what that means for farmers.
Well, I suppose, Joyce, thanks for the question there. That's just to reiterate, youth, as I said, youth is vital with proper support, finance, planning. I suppose around our part, our membership, a lot of it's taken up by part-time farmers, and I suppose we see a lot of older guys are reluctant to let go, to trust the youth. We see a lot of that. I suppose again, family debt is a huge, burden that they don't want to, burden the younger generation with that. But with the proper plan and family planning, there is a future, and especially with Ireland, I just heard recently there a couple of visitors, we had hosted a couple of visitors over there, visitors over from England, and they had, one thing that they commented on around the airports and it was the Irish, the food they were eating, like coffee and the milk sticks and all that was all packaged, in Ireland as Irish produce, whereas they're saying they don't see that in England or they don't see that in Scotland. So that was encouraging to hear that. So again, reiterate to the youth as well. Sorry if you were saying about the EU. Well, we have always advocated we need a foot and a voice in the EU. I was fortunate to work, I suppose, with Martina in the past, Martina Anderson, and she did echo somebody's. She couldn't pay enough plaudits to her with the work and the voice she gave us in the EU. Excellent spokesperson. It's still important we need to have a voice there. Going forward, again, not to be repeating myself, our cap here, or our government money here, farm support, we're very far down English or Whitehall's priority list. It is, it's not ring fenced, and we're going to struggle. We're going to be fighting against, defence is a big thing now in a war-torn country in the world at the moment. So defence is a big thing in England. So it's going to be a lot of money directed that route. Education. So we're going to be fighting fires on all fronts to actually be guaranteed funding for agri here going forward. I feel farmers aren't been properly rewarded in terms of what they've been. The single farm payment, it's not index related or inflation related, which is crucial. It hasn't went up, and it is even this year. It's going to be another 6.5% shaved off it on top of the 9% last year. So, and then obviously on the other side, they're saying, well, it's been, you're farming for nature packages and farming for this and farming for that. It's not going to suit everybody. The sheep farmers, wildfires. On the hills or on mountains, beautiful landscapes. The guys aren't been allowed to graze those areas with sheep or the proper cattle to keep the heather and whatnot, burnable material in check. It's just the funding is vital for this. But the rural support money has been cut, and it's really becoming very evident, and it's not going to be coming from Whitehall. So it's vital that we get back into Europe and be able to, be able to draw down funding that we used to be able to draw down. I think it's vital. You can see it around the rural communities. There have been sports halls getting funding, football fields. That's all stopped.
And just, yeah, perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you, James. And just quickly, Michelle, because we're stuck for time.
Yep, Joyce, thanks for your question. James had used the word vocation earlier, and that farming does. There's a wee bit of that in it. When you think of the word vocation, you think of nurses. And we're asking nurses to do a really, really important job, a job that people's lives depend on, and we're not giving them the terms and conditions or the remuneration that they deserve. And there's a wee bit of a similarity there between nurses and farmers. So we don't want to take advantage of people who go into the industry. We want to ensure that we give them a supportive environment in which to work. when I went into the Department of Agriculture in 2007, I wanted to change the ethos within the department to be in one where we were supporting and encouraging and working with farmers. I wanted for farmers to look forward to seeing an official coming up the lane instead of panicking when they seen one of us coming. So I think that needs to change. Clearly, in the current regime, we are subject to the British government's decision-making and policies. The inheritance tax is a big, big game changer. And obviously, within a new regime, that wouldn't be the case. And I think they don't understand. Farmers don't own their farm. They're custodians of it. They're looking after it for generations to come, and they're farming it in a way, but they'll never see the value of that farm. So to put an inheritance tax on those farmers who are basically want to be able to hand on a sustainable business to the next generations, it's just such a blind spot in British policy making. So our policies need to be supportive, encouraging, and ensure the future of farming, and that's how we'll get young farmers in. And again, back into the EU to get the single farm payment back in there. The British government wanted to get rid of the single farm payment for years and years because Britain was a net contributor and it was costing them a lot of money. As James has said, the difference being when it's a defence budget, suddenly the sky's the limit. When it comes to keeping people on the land, keeping people providing food and ensuring that there's quality food available for the people that we rely on. Bad enough that we are dependent on other countries for energy, for gas and things like that. We need to ensure that farming is a sustainable business into the future, that young people, that you want to be a farmer because not just it's a vocation, but because you have a wage at the end of it and you're on a par with your friend group, your peers, and you know that not only are you making a difference to people's lives, you're giving your family a solid foundation as well, and without that we'll never attract us into it, and those vocational farmers will become few and far between. So thanks a million for your question, thanks for being here, and we will continue in Sinn Féin to listen to the voice of young farmers and to ensure that that's heard, because without you we have no farming industry.
Brilliant, thanks Michelle, and thanks to everybody who contributed, because I know it's not easy. A short report will be produced from today's session, and you'll also find details on your tables about how to submit written contributions, if you wish, to the Commission online through the Sinn Féin website or by emailing commission@sinnfein.ie. So just in bringing proceedings to a close, I would like to sincerely thank all of you for coming here today and certainly for contributing, especially to our fantastic panel. I'd ask that we give a round of applause. And we hope to see you all again very, very soon. Sinead.